Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Felicia Jackson from FM Systems, and I want to thank you for attending today's webinar, Learn How to Manage Change in Your Dynamic Educational Facilities, Part 1. Before we begin, I want to cover a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your console, there are multiple widgets you can use. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can click on the Q&A widget at the bottom and submit your question. We will answer these at the end, but if we don't get to all of the questions, we will follow up with you after the webinar. You can expand your slide area by clicking on the Maximize icon on the top right-hand corner or by dragging the bottom right-hand corner of that slide area. An on-demand version will be available about 1 hour after the webinar ends and can be accessed using the same audience link that was sent to you earlier. Today on the line, we have Wiley Coleman, our Manager of Healthcare and Higher Education, and Rich Hobson, our Implementation Specialist. With that being said, Wiley, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Felicia, and thanks everybody for joining us today. We're going to run through a real brief PowerPoint to give a little more background about our company and the work we've been doing in higher ed over the last 20 or so years. Then I'm going to hand it over to Rich Hobson, and we're going to start with the demo. After that, time permitting, we'll do a Q&A session, so hopefully we'll have plenty of time to answer any questions you may have. If we don't, we are happy to take those questions offline and schedule calls or quick email follow-ups or whatever would be easier for y'all. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump in. As Felicia said, for any of you that I've not spoken with in the past, my name is Wiley Coleman. I'm the Director of Sales for Higher Education and Healthcare. And Rich Hobson is one of our consultants, and Rich has a really diverse background, and he works with the majority of our higher ed clients and has about 30 years of higher ed experience all in all, so he's a really valuable resource for us and our higher ed clients. So a little company background. So we've been doing this for quite a while. We've been around for 32 years and sustained healthy growth year over year. At least 20 years of that has been working with higher ed clients. I was actually looking through our records yesterday trying to track down our first one, and we got as far back as 96. So we may have had some folks there before, but at least 20 years. So it's a world that we know really well. It's a world and an industry that we place a lot of value on, and it's an area we continue to expand in and continue to refine our product to better serve our higher ed clients. We do a lot of work in the higher ed industry. We're a gold partner with CFTA. We attend a number of SCUP events. We do the international conference. We go to a lot of regional conferences. And then here internally for our own clients, we have our higher education special interest group, which has been a great group. One thing that is kind of unique to higher ed that's different from our clients, say, in the corporate world is that y'all are very open to talking to each other and knowledge sharing and talking about what works, what doesn't work, and I think ultimately that allows all of our clients to get a much better use of the software. And then the last part of this slide, direct support, that's something that is relatively unique to FM Systems where we manage everything here in-house. Sales, account management, support, consulting, development, hosting, all of it's right here in Raleigh, North Carolina. So regardless of who you're speaking with, whatever department here at FM Systems, you're always speaking with a subject matter expert on FM Systems, and that's always refreshing. Here's a list of some selected higher ed customers. Some of you, I think, are on the line, and others it's a pretty wide range of universities across the country, across the globe, all different shapes and sizes, so I think that shows kind of the flexibility of the software. Some of the core capabilities for higher education with FM Interact, these first two really go hand in hand, improving space utilization and better accuracy and visibility of facility data. What it comes down to is better data equals better decisions. It allows you to make better decisions and better planning for your university, and it really puts you in a much better position to manage your facilities and your space in a proactive way. And I think, with higher ed being such a dynamic industry and all the changes that you're constantly seeing on your campuses, being able to proactively address those things is going to be really important in the future. Of course, being able to manage all aspects of your campus from one centralized system and having really great data transparency across campus, not having different siloed data sets and everyone wondering, which is the actual system of record. Having it all in one place is really nice. And then, of course, the reporting that comes out of this, whether it be federal reporting, state reporting, or just reporting that you have to hand up to the higher-ups in the university. It's really important that you have easy, quick access to that data, and that's, of course, something we'll talk about today, and also even in much more detail in part 2 of this series, which is going to be coming up in late September. So what we're talking about today is our higher education survey module, and we'll go into much more detail on this on the demo, but core capabilities of this module, of course, improving the efficiency and accuracy of your annual space surveys, being able to easily gather data for your HEJS surveys, maximizing indirect cost recovery, having an easy way to do that, and ultimately just streamlining your space surveys is what we're after here and what we've been able to accomplish with a lot of our university clients. I wanted to touch on hosting options really quickly. This is always one of the first questions we get from people, and I figured we would just go ahead and knock this out before the demo. It's really up to you, and we can certainly talk about it in more detail offline if any of you have more questions, but perpetual hosting model, the self-hosted model, which a lot of you may do or would like to do, that's sort of the more traditional software route. We can do that. Our SaaS option, software as a service, a subscription-based software model, is extremely popular across all software industries right now. It's our more popular option today and is becoming increasingly more popular over time. And then, of course, perpetual hosted is sort of a mix of the two, where you can buy a perpetual license to the software and then have FM systems host it for you, just to alleviate some of the IT strain that you may have if you host it yourselves. And with that, we're going to jump into the demo. Rich is going to take over and take us through the higher ed survey module. Again, if we can hold all questions till the end, I think we should have several minutes towards the end to go through those.
Okay. The Higher Education Survey module in FM Interact is unique for a couple reasons that really set it apart. That while it, like many of the survey tools out there, it was designed originally to service F&A surveys to gather the information you need on your 5-year cycle of renegotiating indirect cost factors with the federal government. But we have evolved our survey over the years, plus it's built on top of FM Interact's highly configurable platform, so that we find today that while we have an out-of-the-box default survey, which is highly F&A survey oriented, that we end up in an implementation that's quite common to be building multiple surveys. You may have a survey you want to gather for internal auditing. You may have a survey for state reporting. We have a state reporting utility that will gather the proper information, be configured, and pull it out into a submission file in the proper format for your particular state. So all of those needs of a funding-based survey that details the utilization of space as it relates to grant-funded and research activity, and I'm using the term research very broadly now, is the primary purpose of this module. So let's.
And just to add on to that briefly, what Rich is alluding to is the configurability of the module, and we know that's probably a word you hear a lot in this industry, but one of the core goals of our development team is to have a piece of software that is both very simple and easy to use, but also really robust and flexible, because the way that each of you operates is a little different. There are, of course, some standards across higher ed, but you each have your own unique ways of doing business and your own processes, and you need a tool that can easily mold to those processes, and that's one area where we really, really excel. So just bear in mind that what you see today is very much an out-of-the-box version of the software. It can quite easily be configured both by our team and by you in the future to your specific ways of doing things.
So to show you how that all works, let's go ahead and just walk through a typical respondent survey. This is that out-of-the-box survey I was talking about a little bit earlier that we'll be showing you today. But as we walk through the questions, just imagine that any question on here can be extended, additional fields can be added, and entire new questions or subject areas could be added to a survey, entire new surveys, as we discussed, as I mentioned earlier, or things that you see here may not fit your institution's needs, can be removed very easily also. So with that, let's assume that I am a survey respondent. I've been mapped in the system, so I'm only seeing in the grid here the rooms that I've been mapped to fill out surveys for, so I don't have to figure, well, which ones do I need to fill out, because that's already been predetermined and set up. So based on my login, I'm only seeing a list of rooms that I'm going to survey. So in the very beginning, the survey is going to ask some very basic questions about the space. So is the department code correct, yes or no? If we answer no, then I can propose a proposed department of that biology has been using this room for the last 23 years, even though physics technically is the guardian of that room. Perhaps biology should actually own this room now. If the department, and how I knew what department code I was concerned with, that was all up here in the grid as an easy reference to me. So if the department was correct, then I never would have seen that second question for a proposed new departmental ownership code. Same thing with space use. The university FICOM space codes that you're all familiar with, that if the space use is no longer correct, perhaps it was at some time, then a proposed space use. And once again, if the space use listed up here was correct, then we're not even bothered by looking at that additional question. And then the last basic piece of information, well, the last two basic pieces of information, have the room dimensions changed, yes or no? If the answer is no, or the answer is yes, that's a flag to the space administrator. Well, it's probably time for a walk-by because something has changed there that we don't know about. And then capacity. As with any space management system, there's the overall capacity of a room, and generally that equates to the fire marshal's legal description of what the capacity of a room is. Here, we're concerned with the capacity based on how is the room currently being used. So the respondent, who is frequently, not always, but frequently a principal investigator, is going to fill out, so let's say this room has a legal capacity of 40, but right now, based on the activity going in there, we'd never want more than 12 people in there at a time. So here's a chance to specify that. Based on current use, capacity of this room is limited to 12. Let's move on to some of the more program-specific information in the survey. Functional category codes, whether it's your federal survey, your state reporting, these are a standard set of codes that come out of the IPED standards for everything higher education. And we can identify here how is the room being used and at what percentage. So I'm going to edit one of these rows rather than actually add a new one. So I can look up the activity code, and they're all listed right there. If I want to associate a curriculum code, I can put in the classification of instructional program code and associate that. If this is an instructional activity, and you can also leave that blank. If research is going on in this particular room, I can identify the research type, organized, non-organized. I find more and more schools want the value of other in there. Lab type, I can specify, is it a wet lab, a dry lab, or other. On some occasions, I've had schools ask for one or two additional lab type values in there, and adding those is no problem at all. And then we identify what percentage of the room is being used for this collection of values. That's essentially how we record functional category codes to rooms. The next item on the standard, our standard out-of-the-box survey, is occupants. We can identify occupancy. Occupancy is someone who has a desk, a telephone, a mailbox. That's a permanent or long-term assignment to that space. If you're a principal investigator and you're using that space just for research, but it's not really your home base, then you probably would not assign yourself as an occupant. But you would go on to the next question, PIs to rooms, and identify, okay, I'm working in this room. I'm working in this room 76% of the time. I'm conducting this research project that's under the sponsorship of this department, funded by this particular grant. If you're doing 3 different projects, each funded by different grants, or the same project funded by different grants, you can enter multiple rows in this question to specify what grant is funding this. All that information will come together in some reports we have that you can use for grant reporting. And then also, if your institution tracks a project ID separate from the grant ID, we can associate that. And then again, you can assign a percentage. I'm doing research under this project funded by this grant, under this project number, using this room 76% of its capacity. So that's PIs to rooms. Organized research accounts, if I just want to associate the organized research accounts to the room, identifying a total percentage of this type of activity to this room, irrespective of whether it's over 1 PI or 30 PIs, you can specify that in this question here. Room amenities. Of course, a room amenity is something that's really part of the room. It's bolted down or it's too big to be moved. These are typical examples of room amenities. I think the majority of our implementations, we just use, the client has us using a simple list. However, we can also integrate this question with our asset module. So if you're using our asset module to maintain an inventory of research assets, equipment, that sort of thing, or room amenities for that matter, we can actually look up right into the asset module and assign that value during the survey. So we give you some options there. As throughout Interact, we give you many options of how to go about business. Chemicals to rooms. You probably have a system of record for tracking hazardous chemicals, and that identifies how much you've bought, how much you've used. Do you always know exactly what room the stuff is in, so to speak, at any given time? And so we can actually take a data integration feed from your primary system of record for tracking hazardous chemicals, and then you can assign saying, okay, I'm using ammonium nitrate, this is measured in grams, and I'm using this amount in this particular lab, and that's all tied to the one room that we're conducting a survey for right now. The same holds true for radioactive materials, that you certainly would have a specialized system of record for tracking radioactive materials, but the assignment of those materials into specific rooms can be identified through FM Interact, and we would just take a simple data feed, it can be nightly, monthly, whatever the frequency is appropriate in your case, and pull that information into a list, an inventory list of radioactive materials into Interact, so that your researchers, your investigators can identify in which rooms are those materials being used. Beyond the survey itself, Just a couple other things we'd like to take a quick look at. There are about 15 standard reports that come with the survey module. We're just going to show you a couple of them, what I think are the more interesting ones today. But this one, PI dollars per square foot. Because we capture and we store in FM Interact the grant revenue. We'll take a data feed from your financial system, and then also the grant expenditures, which of course that's when PIs get recognized for earning a particular amount of a grant award, so that the money can be billed, so to speak, or used from the granting agency. Then that's captured, and that's part of the information that feeds into this report here, where we can calculate by principal investigator the total area that they're using, the recognized expenditure amount per grant, and then compute a ratio of dollars per square foot. It's a great way for PIs to attract and to be able to show their utilization of grant dollars and the grant dollars they brought into an institution, and it's a way for the institution to be able to compute a return on investment of various research projects. So our survey does a lot of integrating of the dollars involved in research and associating it with space, your space inventory and the utilization of that space inventory. We can also generate reports, outputs of the various codes so that respondents can study up on those before filling out the survey. If you're reporting to public or private grant funding sources, particularly if you're not using an indirect cost factor, this particular grant, space allocation per funding source and grant will identify your space allocation per funding source. This is a drill down report by grant number down to the building and showing all the area in a particular building that's been allocated for that particular grant, and then ultimately showing the fair market value. So if you're working under a grant where you're showing space utilization as a match to dollars, here's a way to capture that information. And the calculations we use are highly defensible, so this gives you a good way to present this information without having to invent your own metrics on how you're going to calculate that. And then finally, the survey administrator has a dashboard report that will show them when any particular survey is open, and even if you have multiple surveys, they could be open and closed individually. It would show completion by number of spaces, number of departments that have completed their surveys, and then we have a number of utilities that make managing the surveys easier, such as if a new space comes into your space inventory, you just click this button and it sets up survey questionnaires for that space. If a space ceases to exist, for example, 2 rooms get consolidated into 1, you can remove the old surveys. You can sync information. When we were talking about proposed departments, proposed space types, you can sync that information into the permanent record about a space, and other maintenance utilities that help you identify where the surveys answered accurately. Did respondents exceed 100%, for example? And so it's time to let them know that you can't fill up a room and use a room more than 100%. All of that's captured, so it makes it easy for the survey administrator to communicate with the respondents to have very accurate data. That concludes a tour of the survey questionnaire. There are other management utilities which individually we'd be more than happy to talk to you about, but I think that gives you a quick overview of what it would feel like to fill out the surveys in our module. Wiley?
All right, so we have about 5 minutes left for questions. I believe there's one already typed in. So for the audience, the question is, the survey appears to list only rooms that are 100% allocated to a single department. What about shared spaces? Do those appear in the survey list as well?
Yes, we can support shared spaces. And so if part of the share is for something unrelated to what you're capturing in the survey, then that can be excluded, and we can only, so we may be, all of those room percentages may be 76% of 50% of the room. So we do have a cascading calculation. So if you're sharing the space, only half is using for research, and then you're splitting that out by percentage, by PI and type of research, all of those percentages calculate together.
All right, and the next question for the audience, does this system accommodate both the NACUBO codes, which you showed, as well as the OMB A21 circular? And
yes.
How many of those shares/splits does the software allow, and does it require that the total allocation equal 100%?
It flags that the current allocation is either at 100%, under 100%, and flags it if it goes over 100%. We actually will be adding a new feature in the system which will actually block a PI from booking a room or identifying a room through the survey at more than 100%.
If that's your preference.
Correct.
So it'll be an option to cap that 100% if you'd like.
Correct.
Okay, any other questions? All right, so as you digest the information we talked about today, you're welcome to reach out to us with any additional questions, or if you'd like to schedule a time to see this more one-on-one, we're happy to do that as well. I believe Alicia is going to send out an email here fairly shortly for part 2 of this series, which is going to be going over FM Interact Higher Education as a whole, and we're going to show you that in the new 8.5. So you're going to see FM Interact specific to higher education, our higher ed specific solution in the new 8.5 user interface. So we're looking forward to that. And we appreciate everybody joining us today. This is recorded, so we'll be emailing this out to those of you who were not able to attend live today. And again, thank you for joining.